We've been fighting a long time, and we have all lost so very much, so many loved ones gone. But you are not alone. There are pockets of resistance all around the planet. We are at the brink. You have no idea how important you are. If you're listening to this, you are the resistance.
Ave Maria Stella Dei Mater Alma atque semper Virgo Felix te porta.
Welcome, everybody. Steve with Sense for the Alien coming at you again with a recent guest we had about a year ago. I think, Dan, the first book you did with Tan, and I know long time no video, but welcome back. There's a new book you come out with, Tan Books, called Spiritual Warfare Q&A, so which the question and answers about everything under the sun regarding spiritual warfare, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
It's kind of it's a bit of a Z-pack of books. So we decided just to do a Q&A format on this one, just as more of a reference guide than anything else. So you could just kind of go to it, read a paragraph. I mean, read one question, put it down. It's more of a reference. But I've kind of broken the questions down. Between Jesse and I, we get hundreds of questions a week. And so just fielding these questions is very time consuming. So he approached me a couple of years ago and said, "Hey, let's put a Q&A book. Let's do a Catholic answer." You know, what was the old radio replies? Remember that?
Radio replies, yes.
And so we wanted to do a modern version of radio replies, which is kind of what this one is. And we took, we kind of I categorized them into various sections and groupings. Yeah.
So this is demon replies instead of radio replies.
Basically, yeah. Spiritual Warfare Edition.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you get everything from even the simple 101 level, like what is exorcism, to really more like, hardcore stuff. Like what was chapter 3? Like, I guess the regular layman prays like, chapter 3, what is chapter 3?
Yeah. But I think that's part of it. I think we need to kind of bring back to Catholic norms this whole apostolate of exorcism and deliverance, and kind of put it back back where it belongs, which is the 2,000-year tradition of the church. And so, yeah, on one level, it's very simple. Why should I not look at a horror movie? Why should I go to a haunted house? To what makes the priest special? What is the Tria Munera? I've given presentations to priests at various dioceses on the Tria Munera, and they're like, "Yeah, I know it's true, but I've never heard this before." So we have priests going through the seminaries that aren't getting really a deep dive theology of the priesthood. They're getting a lot of other stuff, but they're not getting that. So, and it all flows from that reality. One of the things that really is Father Ripperger's contribution to this, many contributions to this field, is the understanding, the unpacking of the authority structure. So I answer some questions on the authority structure and why that's significant.
I mean, there's people all over the place that aren't Catholic talking about it. You were on Sean Ryan. Just the other day, Tim Poole puts out a tweet about bringing exorcisms back, and I responded just because I saw it going, "Hey, we haven't gone anywhere," and put the Ripperger's conference on exorcism in the response, and he plays it on his show the next day.
Yeah,
so there's a lot of people that aren't Catholic interested in, like, what? How did Sean? I don't think Sean isn't Catholic, I'm guessing, right?
Yeah, he was born Catholic. Yeah, he was born and baptized. Yeah, born Catholic, but he was baptized. Yeah.
So how was somebody like that talking to you? Did that open up more questions, avenues?
Yeah, it was a good conversation. He's one of the things I've learned in academia. There's a difference between knowledgeable and intellectual, and intelligent. And so he is knowledgeable just because he meets so many people, but he's also intelligent. So he's seeking, it's kind of evident to most people that watch him. And his base following are ex-military guys, retired military guys, and active duty military. So, but yeah, that the Lord is calling him and drawing him back. So he's just got a lot of questions. And he's got a lot of questions about the faith, and of course, demonology, angelology, exorcism. This is a topic people, when you look at the Minnesota shooter, when you look at Charlie Kirk, when you look at all these things, there's certain patterns being set, and it's even the secular media, and I would, even though Sean's Catholic, he's still secular media. He's not doing what you do. Tucker Carlson, is going on and talking about getting assaulted by demons at night. What is that all about? You've got secular guys, secular media talking about spiritual combat, because one of the things that we say in our business is that the demon militates to absurdity. And so when it gets really absurd, the demon in effect plays his hand, and people are waking up going, wow, this is not just a couple of kooky people, we've moved out of that kind of crazy serial killer type. I mean, you don't hear about serial killers anymore. You're hearing more about some of this stuff, and people are starting to realize evil isn't just specific to one person or two people. There's something spiritual going on across the world, and people are starting to realize that. And so even the secular media are asking questions like, what's going on? What is this, all this exorcism stuff? And
it's interesting that the secular guys are asking, and the Catholic ones seem to be saying we should be focusing on this. I get it. We should, good, true, beautiful, but almost to the point of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We don't want to talk about this at all. And the secular guys were talking about, but our guys are like, yeah, no, we're done with spiritual warfare. We're not doing Benedict medals anymore. We're not doing anything.
Yeah. There was a priest recently posted, I'm not going to name his name, but he posted that in his experience, no one has ever been afflicted by reading Harry Potter, but it's more dangerous to read Father Amorth books, so it's like, okay, so you're defending Harry Potter and you're discouraging reading the grandfather of the return of modern exorcism, who's brought it back into the fold, into mainstream Catholicism. I did the developmental edits for Tan for the Father Amorth's book, his official biography. And so, I mean, I think at that time in the early 80s, there were, I think he said 9 exorcists in the entire United States, maybe 20 or 30 in Italy. It was a little more acceptable over there, because they had Father Candido Amentini there in Rome that was Father Morse, sensei, if you will, that he trained him. And so there was just this idea coming out of the Second Vatican Council that the devil is just, it's just this, you remember these things. It's just the projection of the evil that's in all of us. There's no such thing as a personal evil or devil. This is just us. I was in Germany, for example, and I was explaining the problems of modernist philosophy as applied to Scripture. And so I have a translator. I don't speak German. I have a translator, and I said, all right, fill in the blanks. Jesus didn't multiply the loaves. He got everybody to, and the whole place says whatever the word for share is in German. The whole room went, to share. I'm like, yes, this is what modernism looks like. And part of modernism is the denounces the effect of the fall. It's anti-supernatural, so we don't believe in that stuff anymore. We've progressed beyond that. So, and I think what the secular media and the secular people are saying is, whoa, yeah, there's something evil out there. And they never portray, Reverend Tim Tom in the movies, when there's a possessed person. It isn't Reverend Tim Tom with the skinny jeans and the cool T-shirt, and the nice little beard. They don't call him in. They call in the Catholic priest. But there's something we're seeing. Here's the thing that in our experience is that when evil is institutional, when the entry point in a particular case, for example, is institutional, meaning institutional, ritualistic, Satanism, etc., then there must be injustice, an institutional response by the institutional hierarchical Catholic Church. So there's low-level liberations can take place, but when it's institutional, then, and that's what we're starting to see. We're starting to see, the enemy, the devil hides in plain sight, and we're starting to see more institutional evil, more overt and institutional backed evil. And so people are looking like, whoa, what do we do? And so the secular world is looking at the Catholic Church, and the Catholic Church is going, well, maybe. One bishop told Father Ripperger, I believe the devil exists. I just don't think he's in my diocese. And that's kind of the attitude,
It's about, we're good here.
We're good. I mean, I know he's out there, but how many Catholic families are saying that, I know the devil exists, but he's not in my family. He's not going, what am I? I'm not, he's not going to bother me. Well, yeah, he is,
Yeah, just like everything else. It's always everyone else's problem, but we're good here.
Yeah, we're good here.
Speaking of some of the stuff that's in the book that maybe, I mean, I think most people on the channel probably know what exorcism is and know the basic fundamentals of things, but they might not know stuff like, oh, there's a lay team. There's a team with you, with Father doing this.
Yeah.
Maybe they think that's kind of sexy and it says like, I want to do something like that. What are the dangers in that first? And what do you mean? It's not like someone just goes up and goes, hey, I'm going to sign up for reading this week. It's nothing like that. There's a procedure, right?
Yeah, so we work strictly within the authority structure of the local church. So the authority structure is critical in spiritual combat. When Pope Benedict, for example, in 2010, did 3 homilies on the Tria Munera, the threefold office of the priesthood, of the ordained. And then when he got to the munus regendi, the duty to rule, to govern, he links it to Jesus's words to Peter on the Sea of Galilee, or the Sea of Tiberias. Do you love me? Feed my lambs, tend my sheep. And so feeding, tending gives the twofold ends of the authority structure: to feed, to provide, and to tend, to protect. So provision and protection. And so this is why this is a critical element of spiritual combat. When you're working under the right authority structure, you have protection and provision. And so without that, it can, the barometer of retaliation when you work outside of the authority structure. It's very dangerous within the authority structure, let alone outside of it. So lay associates that work with exorcists, it isn't like, we're just expert consultants. We're there. It's a medical model in the sense that you have, triage, nurses, intake personnel, people that clean the room. You have that's the medical model. And so, so the experienced guys are like me, or more like Nurse Ratched. If you remember Nurse Ratched. This is, if you want to, you have to go through this process to find liberation, and these are the rules you're going to have to live by. And we rely heavily on the sacerdotal charism. The priestly charism, the authority of the priest, and is the traditional model that we practice. And it, to me, it's I've seen and worked with and in the other models, and I wouldn't do it any other way, to be honest with you.
Yeah, I remember long ago we were in my brother and a couple other friends of mine. We were in this prayer group, and we were in a debate with them as men's guys, and they were kind of in the charismatic mindset of things and praying over others and things like that. They were Catholic, but they were into that thing. And I remember fathers talking about somebody saying that laymen's hands are not ordained. So if you're doing that, putting your hands over, it's kind of like nails or knives coming in the spiritual world. Is that kind of, am I saying that right? Or
yeah, it goes back to the words of when Moses, God through Moses institutes the Levitical priesthood. Exodus 28, I think 4 is in Exodus. He says, to take Aaron's sons and anoint their hands so that they may serve as priests to me. And so the priest hands are anointed, and ours are not. If you've ever been present when a priest receives the last rites, or the anointing of the sick, I've been present on a couple of occasions. And a priest, one particular was my pastor. My previous pastor passed away years ago. He puts his hands out because every first Friday he sees the lay people come up and they stick their hands out. And the priest, the anointing priest, took his hands gently and turned them upside down and said, "Father, you are a priest forever. Your hands are already anointed." And he anoints the back of the hand, which is the custom for priest anointing other priests. Because of that, it goes back to that, the anointing of the hands, and everything that a priest does is sacred. So his hands are sacred. The demon recognized that. Just putting his hands out in that position is it's sacerdotal, and it's a position of authority. And so the demon recognizes that in session when a priest puts his hands out. And so it just goes back to good theology. And there's a separation. This is why I bring this up in the book. I mean, I cite the Second Vatican Council, 2 places in Lumen Gentium. It says that the difference between the priesthood of the ordained and the universal priesthood of the laity and the sacerdotal priesthood of the ordained, it says in Lumen Gentium chapter 10, differ in essence and degree, right? Essence and degree. And so it isn't just, you know, I've started learning judo, right, and jujitsu, and I'm a white belt. And if they had a lower belt, if they had a see-through belt, I would be a see-through belt. Okay, you know, I was a boxer, you know, and so I'm not much of a grappler. So I'm learning. But I've got a friend, you know, who's at SEAL Team 6, 16 deployments, black belt in judo and jujitsu, Navy boxing champion, and a Muay Thai fighter, 6'3", 275 pounds. So there's no world existing that I could ever beat him. Okay. Right. But we only differ by degree. By degree. He's a black belt, multiple black belts, and I'm a single black belt. I mean, a single white belt in judo and jujitsu. And so, but we only differ in degree. We participate in the same sport. What the council says is that the two priesthoods differ in degree and in essence. So the essence of the ordained, we hear so much about the springtime of the laity, the priesthood of the laity, the synodality, but we have to keep these distinctions and not collapse them in some Protestant type way, which happens. And we've taken into this particular apostolate, we've kind of uncritically accepted from Protestantism through the charismatic renewal. We've accepted certain norms or assumptions that are just not Catholic. A second element from the Lumen Gentium, chapter 31, the charism of the laity is secular in nature, the Latin indules secularis. So it's ordered by its innate nature. We are geared, ordered, pointed to the secular realm as lay people. And the priest is ordered to the sacred. Everything his sacred anointed hands touch, you know, he's ordered to the sacrifice, the ultimate sacrifice, the holy sacrifice of the Mass, but to the administration of the sacred things. He is the guardian, the safeguarder of the sacred things, an administrator of that as priest. So and actually Good Friday, it's chilling if I were a priest, and your brother knows this. The priest prays. Now remember, the priest is in persona Christi, priest, victim, and altar of sacrifice. So the priest's entire life is ordered to the sacrifice, even giving of himself in sacrifice. Our lives are also, the commonality between the two priesthoods is sacrifice. Think about it. When we go to Mass, there's an altar rail. It's not just a communion rail. There's an altar rail that provides a separation, because that word to make him whole, or to anoint and make holy, right? Hagiases is the Greek, means to separate. There is a separation between the sacred and the secular, but that separation is the altar rail. So the priest confects and completes the sacrifice. And then when we receive communion, he distributes communion to us. Our sacrifice is in union with his sacrifice, right? And so that's why it's an altar rail. Our sacrifice is complete. The commonality is sacrifice and suffering between the two priesthoods. We have to keep these two priesthoods in tension, because it makes a difference in spiritual combat.
I don't know if you've heard Garanger write about that. He calls it the people's altar.
Yeah.
I always thought that was cool, especially the old way they had the veil that came over. So,
yeah. And your hands go under the veil. You know, I mean, you don't go like this. You don't stick your hands over and lean over there, because that is a separation. You know, the separate. If you look at the priesthood of the Old Testament, the principles carry into the New. Right? What Christ didn't abolish; he came to fulfill. What is separated? That word, to make them holy for me, that they may serve as priests. Hagiases, to separate, to sanctify. That word means that this is the embedded into that word. What is separated? Time, space, and status. What is time separated? The liturgical calendar. Right? We have days of feast. We have rogation days. We have feast days. We have Marian feast. We have all this liturgical calendar, just as the Jewish people did. We have our own sanctified calendar. Time is set apart. Space set apart. They had the tabernacle. We have the tabernacle, right? Every Catholic church, that's sacred space. Even within that sacred space, there's a separation of the separate, because that's what the word means, to separate, to make holy, to set apart. And then status. So time, space, and status. And what is the separation of status? That's the unique ordained priesthood of the old Levitical, but then that again carries into the new priesthood. With the change of a covenant, there is also a new priesthood, says St. Paul to the Hebrews. So we see this separation. And so there is a distinction between the two priesthoods, that the priesthood of the ordained, the sacerdotal priesthood, they are a priest forever, right? Our wives will remind us after our deaths, they are no longer bound to us, right? They're no longer our spouses. A priest is a priest forever. And so this is what makes that uniqueness of the priesthood. And the demon understands this theology far better than the best and learned of theologians. He understands this and he responds to this. And this is part of the rules of engagement that we have to bring back into Catholic norms.
Before I get on that, that was a great segue into it. But what going back with the laity and the separation, weren't the in Matthew the 70, weren't they technically laymen? How do we?
Yeah, that's what you hear. No, actually not. I can give you an academic presentation I did on this a couple of years.
Keep it under 9 hours.
What's that?
Keep it under 9 hours.
Right. No, for sure. But no, the 72, St. Augustine says the 72 are to the 12 as the second order of priests are to the bishops. So remember that Jesus sends out the 12 in Luke chapter 9, and he gives them power and authority. Those are two different things. Power is not the same as authority. In the charismatic model, power is authority, but it's not. It's separated. Power is something extrinsic. The power of the Holy Spirit will come upon you, right? The angel Gabriel says to the Virgin Mary. Authority is something intrinsic. Power is dunamis, the Greek word. Authority is exousia, from the being of, out of the being of, and it comes through office. So Jesus sends the 12 out, the apostles, with the unique power and juridical authority, right? And then he sends out the 72 or 70, because sometimes some of our translations say 70 and some say 72, because some scribe like you or me said, no, it has to be 72. It can't be 70. Or he said, no, it can't be 72. It has to be 70. There were 70 nations in Genesis chapter 10, right? Going out so the 72 are going to participate in bringing the gospel to all the nations. And so the 72 are being sent just as the apostles are being sent. But there's also there's a discrepancy in 70 and 72 between the Hebrew and the Greek. But also Moses shares in the administration and calls upon the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit falls upon 70 elders in the camp of Israel and 2 outside the camps. You have 70 or 72 that share in the administration as presbyteroi, right? And share in the administration. And so if you look at the early church reception of this, you can go to Hippolytus of Rome, who was a disciple of Irenaeus, who was a disciple of Polycarp, who was a disciple of John the Apostle. He's writing in the late 2nd century, in the late 100s. He's where we get the Easter as Christmas. As December 25th. He's where we find out that Matthew, where Matthew went, where Thomas goes to India, that James goes to Gaul, etc. So we get the list of where the 12 went, or the 11, and then he gives us the list of the 72. And if you look at that list, according to St. Hippolytus of Rome, every single one of them were bishops of early apostolic sees. First bishop of Damascus, first bishop of Cilicia, first bishop of Cappadocia. So every single one of those listed were either apostles or evangelists, like Luke is in there, Mark is mentioned, and the first bishops of these very apostolic sees. This is why St. Augustine says, no, these guys were all ordained. And also St. Bede, the Venerable Bede, says the same thing. These represent the priesthood in relationship to the bishopric. And so the 72, in a strict sense, they're ordained. In the broad sense, of course, we got to keep that tension. Lumen Gentium 31. We are secular in nature. The laity, we participate in bringing the gospel, but in the secular realm. But these guys, according to tradition, were all bishops. They were all priests.
So before I busted that in, you mentioned rules of engagement with the demons. So these guys are very, very legalistic. So
right.
They do whatever who's in charge. So like the commander, Father R, whoever's the exorcist in the room, they have to do what if he has the authority and the ruling from the bishop, they have to answer correctly to him, even if it's in a different language. I think you guys bring up, and then if it's like a 3,000-year-old language, it's up to you guys to figure out what he just said. He might have, yes, agreed to what his name was, but you have no idea what it was until you find out.
Right. So, yeah. The movie Nefarious, he mentions that in that movie, and that's actually a good movie. You understand. If you want to understand the diabolic psychology and the way the demon thinks. And those, I know those guys, we were at a conference together last year, the guys that made that movie, and they said they watched hundreds of hours of Father Ripperger videos to kind of grasp, to understand the diabolic psychology. And that the name Nefaris, he says, my name is actually a 3,500-year-old extinct Ugaritic language, which you won't understand. And so there was a demon that actually gave the name, because that's one of the questions that the exorcist asked during session, according to the ritual. And Father Ripperger took it to there was a linguistic specialist who said, yeah, this is, some Ugaritic language written, it's been extinct for 3,000 years. And here's basically the translation, what this name means. So yeah, he'll give you the name, and but some of the demons are mute. We know from Scripture, mute and deaf spirit, I command you. And so some demons are mute, and they'll give you their name, but it's a hand symbol, some kind of hand signal or a head movement or something else. So it's not he's bound to obey the exorcist, because the exorcist has the mandate of the bishop. And so he bears that full authority of the bishop, but he doesn't have to make it easy for him.
We'll get into the idea, because I think Father had a bunch of hard time with some other apologists giving him junk about quoting the demon in a conference, saying he was quoting saying that Our Lady, saying beautiful things about Our Lady, truthful things. And since you helped out with the book with Amorth, I brought up in an interview with Father, it says Amorth actually says sometimes a demon will speak the truth under the command of the authority, right?
Right, absolutely. And the thing is, it's not like it's one thing, we have to be very careful. The old saying is, if you go looking for the devil, he will find you. So right. we have to mortify an unholy curiosity. In fact, St. Augustine gives 3 things that attract the demon to us. And the first one he calls an unholy curiosity. So you have to be very careful of that. And there's a lot of people that work in this particular field that are just talking about what the demon says. And it's fascinating. And it really doesn't, if it's not catechetical, there's no reason to talk about it. And so the things that Father brings up, that I'll bring up, that I put some examples here in the book. These are and I address the issue in the book. These are when it's catechetical, when it's reinforcing what we know to be divinely revealed truths of the Roman Catholic faith. If it reinforces it, then we know it to be true. The devil's a liar, right? And the king of liars, the chief of liars. And so we know that the demon lies, but under duress of exorcism, and make no mistake, during exorcism, the demon is being spiritually waterboarded. He's appropriating the senses of the individual, and he's suffering bodily pain through the individual's body. And it's like a spiritual waterboarding experience, and it's not a pleasant experience for him. And so under that spiritual waterboarding, he's going to reveal the truth. But no different than, when I was in Iraq, I had MPs that worked for us. I was a pilot, but the MPs would tell us they would capture hundreds I remember flying over camps and seeing hundreds, if not thousands of captured prisoners, Iraqi deserters and prisoners. And so when these guys would interrogate the Iraqis, at the beginning, they would lie. And then under a little duress, they would tell the truth. And then after that point, then they'll start telling you what they think you want to hear to get food or to stop any pain or whatever. And so but that doesn't mean they're not telling the truth. It's just that you have to discern it out. And so during the sessions, the exorcism sessions, things come out, the nature of the entry point, the nature of if God forces the demon to speak, he's giving the team, and particularly the exorcist, some insight into where the entry point is and how to get him out. So if he reacts to a certain saint, if there's a vulnerability, God always sends help from the mystical body. When there's a vulnerability to a certain saint, when that saint becomes notably present, or there's a demonic reaction to the mention of the saint, St. Mary Magdalene, St. Joseph, they're all going to give you different indicators. St. Padre Pio today, and that gives us an indication of what's really happening. And so, for example, one session, I remember the demon saying, "There's lust in this room." Wow. So he's calling some of the team members out.
Yeah.
Somebody in this room, and so of course they did the job. Everybody's looking around like, hey, it's not me, it's you, right? And then he says, nobody here is fasting, So yeah, we don't build our theology on what the demon says, but he's giving us an insight. There's something sexual in nature with this individual that's his entry point and holding point. And how are we going to how is the team going to assist this person? It's going to be through fasting. So when you have a reaction to the stigmatists like Padre Pio, Saint Rita of Cascia, when and then all martyrs, during the Litany of Saints, all you holy martyrs, the demon reacts to that. He's giving an indication that the person's pathway out is going to be through redemptive suffering. Teresa of Avila said, why would this, Carmelite, cloister, why would she? Well, beside the fact that she's extremely holy and a doctor of the church, when there's a demonic reaction to that, what is the demon signaling? You're going to have to go deeper in the prayer life. You're getting beat in the mental game, and you're only going to defeat this demon by learning to do meditative prayer, and so, St. Joseph shows up at a session, then there's probably some familial breakdown. Oftentimes when there's cases of incest, and that's the entry point, abuse, by the father, St. Joseph is going to show up. Whenever there's curses involved, St. Benedict seems to cycle in, because what was the St. Benedict and the image on the St. Benedict medal, you remember this? They asked him to, some monks asked him to be their spiritual father. They didn't like what he had to say. It was too strict, and they tried to poison him, and a bird, a raven comes and knocks intercedes, etc. And so we get echoes and traces from the mystical body. We don't build a theology on that, but it affirms the revealed truths of the Roman Catholic faith. And I think from that perspective, it's good intelligence.
Maybe some things that people haven't considered, like you brought up curiosity. Would that be with movies, like horror movies, or even movies on exorcism? Would that is there any problem with those?
Yeah, there is. That's one of the questions we address in the book. There, curiosity is, again, St. Augustine said 3 things attract the demon to us. The first thing he says is unholy curiosity. So you have to be very careful, because we dabble in, we look at web pages by put out by priests or Protestants or whatever that are talking about what the devil says in session, and that's all it talks about. The demon is tertiary in spiritual combat. Primary, first, foremost, primary, always and everywhere is Jesus Christ. We have to focus on Christ. Second, in spiritual combat is what are the obstacles to grace? What is keeping me or this person from growing in union with Christ? So first, Christ. Second, what are the obstacles to grace in my life? And then third and tertiary, what is the demon doing? What are the indicators he's giving us? Where's he pushing us? Where's he trying to drive this person? Where are the lies? So, and then how do we counteract that through proper prayer? And so staying focused. So curiosity is something that actually is very dangerous, because it opens you up. It becomes a permission, I've seen doctors fall into this, physicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, I know, that are falling into the curiosity outside of their realm of expertise and doing research on things diabolic, and it opens up. It can be an open door. And so for horror movies, we went through a home blessing, and I was just there to assist the priest. It was a local rural priest in a rural place, and the house was it was a rental house. So we brought in the authority, brought in the owner of the house and the tenant. The tenant was having all these problems. And he had 2 TVs had just combusted on their own, just on two different TVs, they just started on fire. And so father's setting up, getting ready to do a minor exorcism in the home. The house happened to be the house of the former local witch, curandera, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some garbage there. But again, even though there's garbage there, something is letting this garbage to remain. And so I was like, hey, are you looking at porn? No, I'm not. Are you what's going on in the house? Well, my little sister's smoking a lot of dope. And I'm like, well, you gotta tell her to knock that off. Okay. You got to get rid of that stuff. Did you just start watching EWTN? Did you change having a conversion? Now you're trying to watch Catholic TV. He's like, no, I'm not. We're not using the TV for anything unholy. So father's going through the house, and I'm just kind of like the bird dog, just watching and praying. And I see his movies, and I start looking through his DVDs, yeah. And it's even more. So you can tell this was about 10 years ago. And the selection of he had some of the raunchiest horror movies you could imagine, some of the most violent, raunchy horror movies. And I was like, dude, man, you got to get rid of this garbage. And so, he took them out and destroyed them. And I ran into the guy about 6 months later, and I'm like, how's it going? He said, man, after that, everything cleared up. And then it came back. Well, what happened? What brought it back? He goes, well, I kind of got busy and I quit going to mass. I didn't go to confession. And then I went back to confession, started going to mass again, and everything cleared up again. So, but you can see that curiosity with horror movies. It feeds something in us, and it gives the demon, it's an open door. Another problem with it too, Steve, is that when you're looking at all this garbage, those images, but the demon has access, what Father Ripperger calls the data set of our interior life is in our mind or our imagination. All these things embedded in our memories. You have memories of that I don't have, and I have memories that you don't have, but the demon has access to those memories. And so the more we put into our mind meditative prayer, the thoughts of meditating upon Scripture, the words and deeds of Christ, the rosary, Lectio Divina, the lives of the saints, we're now minimizing what the demon has access to. If you're watching horror movies, you're looking at pornography, all those images are embedded into your mind for a long time. And the demon now can take those images and use them and manipulate them and revisit those, distort those, revisit those in your sleep, revisit those in the middle of the night. So all these memories, that's another reason we shouldn't go to these haunted houses now that we're coming up on Halloween. Watch horror movies, because you're not only glorifying evil, you're glorifying the devil's realm, but you're also creating a pathway to your interior life that you just don't need to do.
Well, I was doing Uber back in Denver. I used to drop people off at the Stanley Hotel. People would fly in from out of town to stay at the Stanley. If anybody doesn't know, that was the hotel in The Shining. It's supposed to be haunted or something like this, but it brings up the curiosity part. Right.
You have no business to be there, So even your natural, you're protected by natural law. If you're doing research for academic purposes, that's one thing, but it's another thing if you're just doing it because it kind of gives you a little rush from the curiosity. That just gives a little crack in the door, just enough for the demon to get in and start to manipulate and feed and fuel and draw you away. Again, we should be meditating upon the wounds of Jesus Christ, the infant flesh of Jesus Christ. When you go to the Adoration Chapel, looking at that flesh, do you see the cheeks of his pure flesh when he was born? And can you imagine how perfect his flesh was? Is it the flesh that was beaten and torn apart in the crucifixion? Is it what flesh? Meditating on these things, using the mind, so in prayer, this helps to get us custody of the imagination. And the more you let garbage into your mind, this is a horrible time of the year, because we've allowed the seculars completely usurp a great feast day where many graces come into the church. Remember, sacred time set apart, All Saints Day. We're celebrating all the saints. And so now we've let it be usurped at first by secularists, and now it's been moved into
straight up evil.
Yeah, now it's just a display of evil. Yeah.
So back in the day, some friends in the bookstore, they gave me a bunch of these occult stuff that people were bringing in to dispose of, and they didn't have anything. They knew I had a pit. Not that I was at an open invite. Give me your stuff, I'm going to burn. I just used that to burn wood. So I was like, what are we going to do with this? So I remember Father bringing up about burning this stuff and then throwing it into like a river or something like that. By the way, that was hot, very hot, but I did it. But you saw when I was doing this, a cloud coming in, winds blowing towards the clouds, and it went away after I got done literally throwing this into the stream down the street from the house.
Yeah.
What do people, first off, not to make people start burning things, how do you know if it's an occult thing? And again, is that the right disposal, or how's the disposal process for that?
Yeah, that's one of the questions I cover in the book, and also in the Libra Christo manual as well. Bless, burn, and bury. You pray a prayer, a deprecatory prayer. Lord, may you, bless this object, remove any curses or evil from it, burn it, and either bury it or disable it so it's no longer functional, and ideally into running water. Or you can bury it. Don't bury it in your backyard. Find some place in the woods or something, and get rid of it. But how do you know? Well, some things are overtly satanic. We had a lady, somebody shipped a case of glow-in-the-dark rosaries to a local parish. And then they saw a podcast or somebody was talking about some of these things. There was a time period where people were, Satanists were cursing these rosaries, and there's satanic symbols on there. And sure enough, they look at them and yeah, these have satanic symbols on them. So she takes them to her house, and nice church lady, and she puts them in her fireplace, and it just smoked her house out. The fire department had to come and all that. And so they brought it to the local team to dispose of. And so yeah, some of the things are overtly satanic. We had a case where somebody was, this young lady had a disordinate attachment to an uncle. She also had a continual health problems with her right leg. And she had some other affliction. And so after some interrogation or investigation, I should say, after talking to her and her parents, she mentioned that the uncle had given her this doll, this Barbie doll. And so we're like, hey, give it up. And she, again, that attachment to it, that disordered attachment, she finally gives it up, and is covered with all sort of occult markings, and it's actually missing the right leg. And so we take it and to destroy it. Now this was years ago. Now we actually make the person like, hey, that's more meritorious for you to break it. Looking back, the father, if this happened again today, we would take the dad and say, you need to destroy it because this young lady is under your authority, and you let this garbage into your house. So you need to be the one to fight this. But back then, this was 10 years ago or more. So we take it, Kyle and I, and we destroy it. And we're down by a river, and we look around, nobody's here. So we light this thing up, and it was a Barbie doll, and it burned. I'm not kidding you, like a tractor tire. Uh-huh. This thing burnt and hissed and billowed black and green smoke for like 30 minutes. It was amazing. As soon as we started lighting it up, all of a sudden the wind shifts. I mean, we looked around and scanned the area, the wind shifts, and we don't see anything. All of a sudden we smell just putrid skunk death. And we look over, and 10 feet away is a rotting carcass of a skunk. And we had been there 10 minutes scoping the place out to make sure this was a good place and nobody was around. And then this thing burns like that for just a long time. So, we know in Catholicism that inanimate objects convey the divine, right? They become agency for the divine. Holy water, exorcised salt, blessed oils, even baptism is probably the ultimate, besides bread and wine, of course, convey the divine, not just convey it, actual body, blood, soul and divinity, but holy water conveys the divine. It retains the divine. It retains that holiness, regardless of what your intentionality is. It becomes agency for divine power. Therefore, we can baptize, right? Not just symbolically, but a real ontological change takes place because of the form and the matter. So the cult world works in the same way. They work in the same way. They use matter, cursed objects, saging, and other things to convey preternatural power. And what is that preternatural power? It's diabolic. Psalm 96:5, St. Jerome's translation, the gods of the Gentiles are demons. That's the Latin and the Greek. The gods of the Gentiles are demons. So Moses says, do not set, you make sacrifice, you sacrifice to demons. And so you're evoking preternatural entities, and that power does convey. And that's why cursed objects work in a diabolic inversion of blessed objects.
Since you brought up Barbie, I mean, I think you bring up Chucky in the book, but you don't think the good guy doll comes around literally to life walking, but Annabelle's a real thing.
Annabelle's a real thing. You saw what happened, right?
Yeah.
Recently, that was in the news. And this, I forget it was a comedian or an actor.
It was a comedian, I think it was.
Yeah, bought it as a joke, right?
Yeah.
The last guy, he's going on a tour with this thing. Again, curiosity. Uh-huh. And St. Augustine, curiosity is an opening. It's an open door. And so, yeah, the Annabelle thing was real. And, the Lorraines, the Warrens, I mean, is it the Warrens?
The Warrens, yeah, the Warrens.
They kept all this cursed stuff in their house, like a museum. I mean, that stuff needs to be destroyed because it still bears the evil that's on it. You can't separate the evil and the curse that's on it.
And now do they monetize it? Do they cards for people to come into the.
They must have.
He's dead. He's dead, but is she still kicking?
I think she's dead too. I don't know. Yeah, I know he died, but I'm not sure. But I think I would imagine at least Annabelle was something that was being, I think, monetized. And again, that's very dangerous. And the guy that was driving it around died suddenly in his hotel, and they didn't really explain what happened. So yeah, I do answer the question on Chucky dolls. If you remember, there was a what was the old black and white mystery TV show. I've spaced the name. The Twilight Zone. There was Telly Savalas, a young Telly Savalas was in an episode called Talking Tina, and the doll, he was the stepfather, the cruel stepfather, and the stepdaughter had this talking doll, and it was starting to, it tormented him, it totally tortured him, and talked to him and called him on the phone and just mess with him, and he would throw it out and it would come back. And so we've always had this fascination. Then the movie Chucky came out. But yeah, I personally have seen, I think, 3 different instances in the field where this phenomenon has happened, where you have a doll that's talking, either wasn't designed to talk, that kind of temporarily comes to life and starts speaking, or an actual doll that has a talking script, and that now starts talking in the middle of the night off script and saying things that are like, whoa, what the heck is that? So yeah, so we see this thing happen, but it's just very dangerous to, it's parlor tricks, and just destroy it and move on and focus back on Jesus Christ. But our something in our nature is very hungry for the supernatural and very curious, and we just have to mortify that.
Well, I guess it shouldn't be, but some reason generational spirit is a controversial thing in the Catholic realm, and I've heard sermons being preached against it. Isn't it scriptural? And doesn't Thomas Aquinas talk about this? Why is it a big deal? Well,
hopefully I'll be back on in a few months, because I started off with a book, a follow-up to the manual, and I had a chapter on generational curses, and Father Ripperger asked me, how's the book coming on generational curses? So I said, well, I guess I'm stopping. So I stopped and started, and I actually wrote an entire book, did a lot of research on it as well. Again, we see this phenomenon de facto in the field. Where is it in theology? And there's a lot of confusion. You see people on both sides, the more extremes in different parts of the church are coming out against it. And so in my research, not just Thomas Aquinas, it goes back to the debate between St. Augustine, doctor of the church, and Julian of Maclanum, who was the chief spokesman for the Pelagians. And they were debating the concept of original sin. And Augustine uses, and so Julian of Maclanum was saying, God doesn't do this, and the Hebrew is avant, that the sins of the father, that God says in when he revealed himself at Sinai, to those who hate me. And then the early rabbis and early fathers even debated on, what does it mean to hate God? Is it only idol worship? Is it idol worship and sexual sexual sins? What does it mean to hate God? But to those who hate me, and in that context, he's listing idol worship, following false gods. I will punish in the 3rd and 4th generation, in the children, the sins of the father. And so Augustine says to Julian, hey, wait a minute. What part of God says do you not understand? God says. And then Augustine really delimits between divine law and human law. That Moses God is speaking at Sinai, giving divine law, and that he will punish. And Augustine says, not always, but sometimes in some families, God punishes. And so the effect of the sin. So he distinguishes between the sin itself and the effect of the sin. And in human law, Moses is giving human civil laws that he says that you shall not punish the children for the sins of the father. So Thomas Aquinas fleshes it out much more clearly in his earlier writings. When you look at Thomas, you can't just proof text Thomas like you proof text Scripture, right? So Thomas, in his earlier writings, in the sentences, talks about this, that you have accidental, the effects of sins is twofold. You have the spiritual effect and the temporal effect, basically. And later in the Summa, he calls it the penal and the medicinal. And so this is a year of indulgences, right? That Pope Francis opened up earlier in the year, the holy doors. When you look at Catechism 1472, it talks about there is a dual punishment for sin. You have the spiritual punishment, which is proper to the person who sinned, and then you've got the temporal debt owed to sin. So there's a spiritual effect and the temporal effect. Augustine, and then Thomas fleshes it out much more clearly, is talking about the spiritual effect of the sin is proper to the person. You commit a sin, you alone are responsible for it. But the effect of the sin. So Thomas Aquinas says, inasmuch as the child is part of the temporal goods of the Father in that way, then the effect of the sin, God's himself, his own words at Sinai, wasn't hyperbole. He wasn't speaking metaphorically. Thomas affirms that no, God meant that the punishment it's proper to the individual. That punishment, he's punished for his sins, but the effect of the sin can carry forth. And inasmuch that the children are the product or the property of the Father, the children can suffer the effect. And so when we talk about a generational spirit or generational curse, we try to avoid the language of generational sin because the kind of came in from Kenneth McCall and charismatic Protestantism, which kind of gets picked up by some charismatic priests in the 70s and 80s. If I generate a sin, that means I generated the soul of my children, and that's not true. And so there is only one original sin, but the effect of our personal sins follows that same twofold pattern of original sin. That is the archetypal sin that all sin falls under. An analogy that I would use is we know from our own experience. You have, and again, defining curse not as active agency like in the last conversation on inanimate agency of preternatural power. Talking about the biblical and classic definition of curse is the absence of the provision and the protection that comes with blessing. A curse in biblical language means the withdrawal of blessing, and what that entails, provision and protection. So you have for example, you have a truck driver. He's driving, he drives an 18-wheeler. On his way home from work, he decides to go to the Dewdrop Inn and have a few drinks. He has a few too many drinks, and he gets back in his rig and he gets into a car wreck and he commits vehicular homicide. The truck driver, he's a father and a husband. They don't put his kids in jail. In an unjust system like North Korea, the children can go to jail for the father's sins, but not in a just system, not in human law, as Augustine points out. And so you have the father goes to jail. So he alone is punished for that crime. That, like Moses says, a child shall not be punished for the sins of his father in civil law. And so now, but the effect of that sin, as Thomas says, it's medicinal, it's accidental, because the children who are under the protection and provision of his blessing, of his authority, that is now withdrawn. And so they now suffer the provision. The mom has to go work. They don't have the full income of the father. They don't have income coming in. So they're suffering a lack of provision. Now they don't have the father in the home, and they lack the protection of the father's presence. And so we have to distinguish between the sin itself and the effect of the sin. And in that context, it's very much embedded in Catholic tradition, the concept of a generational spirit or generational curse. Now, how does it become a generational spirit? St. Bonaventure, another doctor of the church, says that God allows the demon to afflict us for four principal reasons. And one of the reasons God allows the demon to afflict us is to punish sin. And so this punishment of the sin is the effect felt of the sin of the father, is the effect of that sin felt and experienced in the children. And it's medicinal. It's for the purpose, as Thomas says, and echoing Augustine, it's not simply to as in some evil sadistic way, I'm going to exact my revenge. No, God is doing it for the greater glory, to punish that sin, so the family can make satisfaction for the sin. And in that sense, it becomes medicinal. And that's a quick treatise on generational spirit or generational curse. But we have to just, again, take the language back from Kenneth McCall, and then again, Father de Grandis, they're good priests, well-meaning. It's a phenomenon they experience in the field, but they're not providing good theology behind it. So when properly understood, it's very much something we experience in the human experience. We see it in cases, but it's something that the church hammered out in the writings of the doctors of the church, like St. Augustine and St. Thomas.
We could go on for another few hours and just we only done like 3 or 4 questions out of the book.
Yeah,
so
sorry.
No, you're good. You're good. There's plenty more in there. We don't want to give the whole book away, so go check it out. The link will be underneath in the show notes, tanbooks.com. Type SF15. Check out 50% off your order, and yeah, they'll get you out. I think it's 2 days shipping anyway, so they'll get you out. You want more of the questions? Go get out. There's plenty more on there. Like, what is chapter 3? Why is chant the Latin important? Speaking of which, is Greek? I'm just thinking of our Eastern brethren. Does Greek do anything for demons?
Well, there's three sacred languages, and that's one of the questions that came up in the book that we answered. All right, is that why is Latin special? We know that Latin is more efficacious, but why? When Christ was crucified, Pilate put his title, Jesus Christ, King of the Jews, right? INRI in Latin, and he put it in 3 languages. In the Gospel of John recounts Greek, Latin, and Hebrew. These are the 3 sacred languages because they were affixed to the cross, right? These languages are sacred. The Hebrew language to the Jewish people, and the Greek and Latin to us as well. Remember, our oldest copy of the Old Testament is the Septuagint, by the way. It is the translation of the Proto-Masoretic text, which has long been lost. And so the Greek language is sacred. The New Testament was written in Greek. So Greek, Latin, and Hebrew, since we are Roman Catholics, and that is the official language. Latin is the official language of the Roman Catholic Church. This language is more efficacious. It's more pleasing to God. And so our prayers in Latin, in that sense, are more pleasing to God. Because of the sacredness of that language.
Very good. Again,
I think the Orthodox would argue the same thing from the Eastern side. Yeah.
Yeah, I would have no clue. I know some Byzantine that are united, but I have no idea. I know like Father Madlack went out and hung out with Father R for a while, and he's Eastern, and there's a bunch of Eastern guys that are interested in this topic. So I have no idea about if they would they do the Latin? Would they do the Greek, or what would they do? Or
yeah, they would do Greek, most likely, or English. If they speak Greek, then they would do it's very interesting. There is a much more developed liturgical response in the Western Church, and there's you don't have the Roman ritual, the rite of exorcism, for the Eastern priest, and so they use the Chrysostom prayers, Saint Basil, Saint Cyprian. There's other prayers that they use as well, but they don't have that formal ritual. So it's not as easy for Eastern priest, Orthodox priests to do this. That's not as formulaic, and they put it that way. So, but they manage very well with the ancient rituals that they have.
Again, links Spiritual Warfare Q&A, Priest and Laity, and also check out Libra Christo, the group that Dr. Snyder's with as well. Again, both that will be underneath in the show notes. Doc, appreciate your time again. Again, we could go all day, and I wouldn't get anything else done the rest of the day, but buy the book.
Yeah. Thank you for having me on, and it's always a pleasure. You're a good brother in Christ, and I appreciate you and great apostle that you have.
I appreciate it. Checks in the mail for that. Don't cash it, it will bounce.
You got it.
Ave Maria Stella